And what's going on, everybody? My name is Jeff Fuller. Some of you know that already. I'm the pastor at Living Hope Wesleyan Church, hopeforvermont.org. And during this pandemic, most of you are aware, I've started to do some interviews. And right now, I want to invite an old friend on. So, Brent Ingersoll, it's good to have you.
Jeff, it is good to be had. It's good to be here, man.
And so let's first talk about the important stuff. The NBA playoffs have begun. Are you a big
Yeah.
Raptors fan just simply because they represent your country?
Not simply because they represent my country, but one of the many reasons I love the 2019 defending champs, the Toronto Raptors. Actually, fun fact, Jeff, as you know, we've got some history on the hardwood. So I got into basketball as a kid, and one of the things that got me into basketball was when they launched the franchise in Canada. They did like a cross country Raptors basketball camp. So I was in 6th grade, and I was one of the kids that went to the Raptors camp. So out there playing with like Alex English. Remember Alex
Yeah.
English,
Oh,
like
definitely.
NBA legend. He kind of got the franchise going. A few other like sort of lesser known NBA guys, and then like one of the commentators now, but he was in the NBA, Leo Routens. He was there as well. So that just like I was Raptors all in from day one before they even played a game. So and I
So
have been a hardcore, diehard. You weren't there the year we drafted Andrea Bargnani #1 overall. I was, and I'll tell you what, last year was so good.
yeah. Hey, did you make it to Harbor Station when they played the
Mhm.
Raptors played against the Philadelphia 76ers in
That's
that
right.
preseason game?
I did. I was there. Jerry
I was
Stackhouse was playing.
Stackhouse was. I was there, center row, courtside. My
Wow.
friend said, "Dress up, act like you deserve to be there," and I just walked up. I actually left Scotty Moore in the upper deck with his dad, and just went down there. And
No
so it
kidding.
was Jimmy King. I was wearing a North
Yep.
Carolina hat, so I was yelling at Jimmy King. He finally looked over, and I tapped my hat like a jerk, and he just shook his head at me. So some
So Jimmy King of the Fab Five, is
of
that
the Fab Five. Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Hey,
Oh, Raptors, baby. That's it.
Hey, what is it about basketball that you love most?
Oh man, I'm still into it, Jeff. Like I don't tell anybody, but I've been playing like secret, black market pandemic runs here in Canada. Like lockdown. I don't know what it's like in Vermont, but in Canada, it was no joke for a while. Like we're a little further left on the socialist spectrum, so they locked things down hard. So, but man, I still play basketball a couple times a week. Love it. I don't know what it is, man. If it's just like been something I've always done that I've enjoyed. I love it's mindless for me at some level. So it's an outlet. Like not just exercise, but it's something I can do. It's my one avenue to, like the public, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like you're in ministry, you know how hard it is if you're not intentional about making relationships outside of the church. And so that's a huge value for me. I have friendships in that context that I wouldn't have otherwise. So, but I mean, I shoot in my yard every day. Like I still love it, man. I don't know everything about it. I think it's the best game on earth. And I don't think there's any second, any rival.
Yeah, and you're Canadian, so it's
Don't even
good that
start me
you
about hockey. I don't even care about hockey. Get out of here.
and so yeah, for me basketball, Vermont's a little bit more left compared to some of the other states, and we
Right.
really did lock down. But we played, I don't know, a pickup game 4 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And that first week out, my legs were killing me.
Oh
And
man.
just playing on blacktop outside, not running for 3 months, it's been
Yep.
getting old. But
We don't have any access to like school gyms, which all the good gyms here,
right,
like there aren't many like private schools and stuff even. So most of the schools and most of the gyms are government owned. So we've been playing in this like old Catholic church, like cement tile. It is rough, but
yeah.
it's really good basketball. I probably shouldn't even be there. I'm like the worst player that plays, but it's super fun.
Well, that's something just about basketball, tying it in as every pastor, or at least I do, I over spiritualize things. But basketball is an outlet. But what I love most about it is the relationships. And we went to Bible college a little bit together. I was enough older that we kind of missed as
Yep.
far as being students together, but just knowing that love of sports was huge. Can you just talk about how, from that time when you entered Bethany Bible College, now Kingswood,
Yep.
those relationships that just grew from playing sports really have played a part in your role and in your leadership?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing with sports is it does affect leadership. Like I have 3 kids of my own, and I don't know that any of them are super interested yet. My 10-year-old son's starting to show signs of it, but more than just it as fun and exercise, like it's good. It's just team sports are just good for your social dynamics and learning leadership and learning how teams function. I think the one of the ways that's helped me most in understanding how to run a staff and how to organize a church and organize ministries has been, I see everything like a lineup. Who's my glue
Yeah,
guy?
yeah,
Who's taking the shot? Like I still see things that way, and it's been a huge benefit. So I think team sports, and if you're not athletic, finding some other team based dynamic is a huge thing. So it's a huge asset to leadership, I would say.
I think that's going to be your book idea. I heard you on the Speaking of podcast with Mark Clark,
Yeah.
and I think it's Josh Gagnon, and you were talking
Yep.
about what book you're going to write. I
Yep.
think just leading your staff like a team, that might be
Yeah.
pretty catchy and practical as well. So,
I've got maybe I'll put that on the list. I've got something I'm starting to cook up now. So it's who knows. It'll be released in January of 2030, but it's in process.
hey, so what's a lot of fun is just knowing you and just being kids at Bible college, and now seeing your picture. I first was introduced to Carrie Newoff because
Yeah.
he interviewed you. And I was like, man, I know Brent, I don't know Carrie. And now, ever since that, a few years ago, I've listened, watched, read everything that Carrie's put out. He's just amazing.
Yeah, he
But
is.
your story is pretty fascinating at King's Church. How you were on staff, and then just due to events, you were leading, and now just being humble and following God, going after Jesus through prayer, which is muchly overstated, but not done well.
Right.
But you did it well. And now you have your picture everywhere. You are known, and God's definitely blessed. Can you just talk about what would you tell your 18, 19-year-old self about this path that God has you on?
Oh man, I would definitely encourage, just say that everything ultimately flows from and funnels back to whatever my relationship with God looks like. Like the doors that have opened and the things that I could look back in my time as in ministry as my greatest quote unquote achievements have been real. Like I just see the grace of God on my life, and some of the most boast worthy moments of my life. I can't boast about it because I just see God's hand and what he was doing in me at the time. And that invitation from Jesus, I would tell my 18-year-old self, when Jesus says, remain in me and you'll bear much fruit, I would encourage myself to listen to that, because the fruitfulness that's come from my life, I can show you that it's a byproduct of my own spiritual intimacy with the Lord, and the dysfunction and disappointments in my life. Not so much disappointments. I think the Lord, I'm going through some stuff right now, with our team, and it's been a hard year and all that kind of thing with COVID. So I think the Lord allows us to face discipline and disappointment for our own betterment. But I would say my bigger flubs and failures have been when I've been sort of leaning on what Brent thinks is right, and my gut, so to speak. So
Yeah.
just like spirit led spiritual intimacy, trying to be a person who, you know, uh, ministers from a place of abundance with the Lord. It's very hard being a type A driven, competitive, back to basketball type person. It's very easy for me to approach God as a means to an end and say, oh, I know I need to pray because prayer works, and I believe that. So I'm going to come pray, God, and I hope you bless what I'm doing now. And so the challenge is you can't cheat your own pursuit of Jesus, and he will not be mocked, and
Yeah.
you will reap what you sow. And if you are going after the Lord just out of sheer fear-based or selfish motives, and not at the end of the day out of a growing pursuit of relationship with him, yeah, it's gonna undermine everything. So relationship with Jesus. I mean, I know, like you said, we say these things like prayer is often overstated and not done well. I would say the same thing in spiritual leadership, man. Like, you just the state of your soul is the state of your leadership, and I have found that to be true over and over again, whether it's leading a team, whether it's preaching sermons, all that stuff. You can't get very far for very long, I don't think, without having just real, fresh life flowing into you from Jesus' presence in himself. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
that's the integrity piece, right? The whole character, and that's what it
right.
comes out. Hey, so Kings Valley Wesleyan Church, how did you get connected with them besides just attending there? When did you first come on staff?
I grew up in Fredericton, which is an hour north of where our central location is. And when I was at Bible college, I was in Sussex, where you attended, and that's about 30 minutes from where Kings Valley, which was what we used to be called, uh, was. And so we traveled down and attend, because it was the church we wanted to go to. And then out of Bible college, my uncle, who was the senior pastor at the time, took a chance on me and gave me an assistant pastor's job, and it was basically everything. It was the the custodial ministry kind of thing, right? So I did everything, and I'm really grateful for him giving me that opportunity. Even to this day, it's been neat. I was able to hire him back a couple years ago, which was kind of cool. But yeah, and then I started working here in 2006, and
Wow.
I basically have had every role here with the exception of like children's ministry. So up until the time I took over, now there's
Yeah.
many roles that I've never had. But so I was well versed in this church. And when in 2012, when our senior pastor, unfortunately, there was a moral failure there. Great story of reconciliation and recovery on his part. That's worth an interview in and of
Sure.
itself. But yeah, at the time I was the youngest on staff. I was 29, but I was the most senior in that I've been there the longest. So I was the one that in the interim the buck fell to,
Yeah.
and God started blessing the interim, and our board said, hey, we don't know what's really happening other than God's up to something, and we're going to keep throwing fuel at the fire. And eventually turned into me being brought on as a senior pastor here. So
Well, let's back up a little bit, and I just want to get to the fact that Ingersoll, that name, seems to carry some weight, maybe some pressure growing up. Did you feel that pressure, and when did you get to the point where you actually were pleased to know the heritage of what you had, that you're a part of being an Ingersoll?
that's a great question. I mean, I've always been pleased about my family. Like, I come from, my family's just it's a healthy, good family. And so I've not taken that for granted. I don't think my whole life. I've just been grateful for it. So from a personal standpoint, I've always appreciated it. Um, I would say, within certain circles, it's that within like Wesleyan Atlantic circles, it's an asset. But beyond that, I mean, the Wesleyan Church is a pretty, it's not a huge power player in the world. So, yeah, it doesn't carry a lot of weight day to day necessarily. But I'm aware of my heritage, and I'm aware of, some of the things that I stand on some shoulders, and that I'm grateful for that. So more than anything, I mean, I would say, y- quite frankly, being an Ingersoll hasn't really helped me in practical ministry. In fact, I've undone a lot of the things that my grandfather and
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
my dad's generation built, and I think that's part of my legacy is every Christian in every era has to ask the question, what does it look like to be the church and be followers of Jesus now? And I've had to bring a lot of change that my grandfather worked really hard to institute. So I often wonder if I could talk to my grandfather who's since passed. He was the superintendent here for 30 years, what he'd think and if he'd have a thing or two to say about how I've done some things. But I'll say this: I am most grateful for the spiritual heritage, like of praying parents, praying grandparents, praying aunts and uncles who don't just see me chasing a career, but they see a spiritual significance to it. I'm very aware of spiritual momentum from that. And that encourages me when I think about my own kids and stuff. Like, you can give your kids an advantage, spiritually speaking, just by being people of integrity, people who say, you know what, as for me and my house, we'll serve the Lord, people who will pray for their kids. You know, my grandmother Ingersoll passed away last spring. I got to do her funeral, I got to speak at it, and is just very aware of, like, you know, go back to some of the fruitfulness conversation in my ministry. I'm aware of a lot of hidden prayers my grandmother prayed for me, you know, every single day. It's just, that's the stuff that, it's not so much the name that carries weight. It's what's behind the name. And there's a lot of people in my family of great character and integrity, and not perfect people, but they're people who love the Lord and they love the church, and they've been disciplined to follow Jesus. So
No, that's so good. We just dropped off my son in Michigan for his freshman year of college, and I told him pray like Grammy, and he knows what that means because my mom, she just is a prayer warrior, and I just hope that, if anything, he knows how to pray like Grammy. I just want to touch base. When the church name was switched, did you have in mind all the details of multiple campuses reaching into different provinces? Was
yeah.
that part of King's Church, or did that come after?
That was the reason. That was actually the primary reason. So we went from Kings Valley Wesleyan Church to Kings Valley Church. We dropped the Wesleyan just because we were getting in our neck of the woods. We're a large church in a small area, and so we were getting a lot of people interested. We were getting phone calls almost on the like every single week saying, "I'm not Wesleyan, but can I come to your church?" And so we're like, this is actually becoming a bit of a barrier. And so we're not leaving the Wesleyan Church, still very much aligned. We still are part of the Wesleyan Church, actually. But we're just going to remove this from the name. So we did that for missional reasons. And then when it came to the King's Church, the Kings Valley was geographically tied to the region that Kings Valley was planted in. But at that time, we had 3 locations, and it was getting very difficult to. We had multiple names for campuses, and yet going back to this geographically tied. So we removed that and just said, hey, we're just King's Church. We have a Valley location. We have a St. John West location. We have an East location, a Halifax location, and so on. So that's the reasoning behind it. Is really practical more than anything, just to try to streamline communication and to help people we're trying to reach understand who we are.
Yeah, it's really good. I found this a little bit amusing, but there's a question to it. BrentIngersoll.com. You have your own website.
Yeah.
And I just go back to your story. It is fascinating. And knowing Dan Lamus, Mike McNeil, Andrew Mays, I mean, all these people that we know back from college, it's just amazing to hear your story. But most importantly for me, it's to realize you were young, I mean, in ministry settings, but what God did in your life when that moral failure took place. Looking back, what disciplines, what conviction did you have to process when you were kind of thrown into the fire during that time?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, I should probably reflect on this stuff more often because they were lessons learned for a difficult season, but they're probably always things you should be doing, right? And so obviously it drove me to my knees. It drove me to a certain place of like, I just got to be in constant prayer. So that was a huge thing. Another thing that I think I look back on that time, and I'm still trying to do this now, and it's much harder. But I had a certain degree of fearlessness that came from, to back up. I was actually planning to plant a church before that all happened, and so I was already gearing up for going to have a small group of people with me. We're going to start from the ground up, and so let's go. And so I had that mindset, and then when that happened and I became the senior pastor, I remember praying to God. I had a good week before the rest of the church knew what was going to hit them. And I remember thinking, Lord, I'm here for whatever you need me in this season. And I'm good. I'm good to hang with whoever you leave, whatever remnant you leave in this church. I'm good to minister and to walk with them. And so I had a real open-handed sort of approach, if that makes sense. Like, God, I'm good. You give me 5 people, I'm good. You know, I mean, we were 500 plus at the time. And you know, a lot of people did leave and a lot of people came, but I just had an open-handedness about it that I think every Christian should live that way, but especially spiritual leaders, pastors should just have a certain degree of open-handedness that it gives you some margin to take risks, to not take things so personally, all those things. Like, just God, it's your church and you've called me to it. And the things that are beyond my control, I'm just going to trust you with. It gets much harder though. I will say it's a lot harder now. Well, almost over 8 years in that, and at 8 years in, people that I've hired, hundreds and hundreds of new people, you know, way more finances, all that stuff. Like, it's funny. Someone asked me, you know, about COVID. They said, how are you doing with it all? And I said, oh, well, you know, if you asked me last year if I thought I had control issues, I would have told you no. And then I lost control. So, and clearly God is showing me that, yeah, there's still some areas in my life where I just want to be able to have my hands around that thing so I can sleep at night. And I think God's just, again, resetting and just saying, hey, my church is my church. You're stewarding it. If I choose to move this here or call you to that, you do it and you don't worry about the rest. And so I think a certain degree of open-handedness, both from a resignation to, or like a commitment I'd already made to God that I was going to plant anyway.
Yeah.
And then I was naive in a healthy way. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And there were some things like I had two families that represented probably 20-25% of our budget come up and try to flex on me pretty early on. And I told them to take a walk, you know, like, you take your money and go kind of deal. I'm not, you're not pushing me around kind of thing. And now I'm like, man, I can't, if 25% of our income walked into our, you know, I hopefully would react the same way, but I think I'd have a harder time than I did even then. But I would say, again, just that open-handedness, that trusting God, that not compromising your integrity, fearing God more than you fear, you know, money or fear your parishioners' opinions or fear risk or whatever. Like, I think fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Like, fear him and then know that he loves you and he's for you. And I think just that's the hugest thing at any stage, any season. If we can walk that way, we're going to do all right.
Yeah, well, a big reason I wanted to have you on is to ask you, what similarities have you found during this COVID time to that when you first took over? Do you think it is a control issue? Do you think you walked so blindly by faith that you knew you needed Jesus, that you didn't have the answers, that's what you got you through 8 years ago, versus now your experience, you kind of lean on that more than you did or would think was healthy?
I mean, that's right where I'm at, Jeff, is like, I know these principles to be true, and now the Lord is testing me at a deeper level, I think, you know, and I'm having to this time, you know, it's one thing to trust God because you have no other option. And that was kind of the situation I was in 2012. And it's another thing to trust God because you're choosing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at right now, where it's like, okay, I can choose to lean on my own understanding, or I can choose to lean on his. And that really is I mean, as we speak right now, that is the fight that I'm having with myself on the daily basis is, you know, like trying not to lead from the place of scarcity and trying not to lead from a place of fear and insecurity. I should be like, God hasn't changed. You know, okay,
Right.
COVID is a change and there's things in the church changing, but God hasn't changed. And so my relationship and the foundation from which I lead hasn't changed either. And so that should flesh itself out in similar ways, but it is a battle, you know, but it's I was saying to one person the other day, it's like, when you're working out and you start to try to put more weight on the bar, there's when I first started going to the gym like a decade ago, things that I thought were heavy, I don't really find so
Yeah.
heavy anymore. And I think that's God's just putting a little more weight on my shoulders right now. And we got hit with something yesterday that was, again, it's like, oh my goodness. And then I went home at lunch and cooked an omelet, and I just felt the Lord say, yeah, this is the level you're at now.
Hmm.
Eat your omelet and go carry on. So
Hey, how early on did you seek out Laurel Buckingham, or did he actually come to you early on?
I sought him out right away when I found myself leading the church. I was very proactive in connecting with him. Spent some time. I got a couple good sit downs with Dr. H.C. Wilson. If any of your people have ever heard of him, he's a former general superintendent in the Wesleyan Church. Just a real legend, great guy. Sat down with him as well. Hired a guy by the name of John Simons to come alongside of me. If nothing else, than to just borrow his influence, because
Mm.
when you're young, you need to borrow influence from
Yeah.
wherever you can get it. And so that's why I always tell our Generation Z people who come up and they're leading worship, and they're like ball caps and chains and tats. I'm like, you look cool, man, but like, I'm all for it. I was like, you can wear that stuff, but everything's permissible, but not everything's beneficial. I'm telling you, you don't have a lot of change in your pocket. So
Yeah.
if you want to influence my grandmother, you might want to think through some khakis. So
Oh, it's so true. And
yeah.
I really love the emergence, I guess, of podcasts. I just love to learn and listen. I didn't like school at all, but I did love lectures and taking notes and all of that. Speaking of podcasts, I really enjoy your podcast, the different people you've been able to engage in conversation. I guess, when did that switch come, when you were seeking out people to help you, to versus people are now coming to what God has done in your life? How difficult is that for you to understand that God has brought you through things to help others go through things that God's taking them through?
Yeah, I think we need to just constantly be receiving and giving and receiving and giving. And the moment you stop both seeking, how others can help you, and seeking opportunities to help others, I think we stagnate. And so, the podcast was just again, like, during lockdown, it was a way for me to have a different type of conversation. One of the things I thought, one of the reasons behind doing it, and I wonder if this is similar for you, was so often I get the luxury of having these great conversations with people like yourself that I think, like, my people would at very least find interesting, if not beneficial and helpful. And so that was really the thinking behind it. It's just this other platform and this other avenue, which, quite frankly, I love. Like, you can do so much in this format where we're not, I don't have to finish on time.
Yeah.
I don't have,
Yeah.
we don't have another service coming in. It doesn't have to, I'm not fighting this or that, and people can pause it and come back. So it's just a real powerful medium that I'm excited about. I'm just trying to gear up to do another round of podcast recordings. Actually, that the only hard part is doing it. That's the only
Yeah.
only challenge.
Hey, so you just returned from vacation. How important is it that you personally refresh, that you get together with your wife, with your family, and you find that time? Because being type A, as you mentioned, do you find it hard to pull away yourself?
I do, yeah. Although I feel like I've seen my family a lot in the last 4 months, but you know what? I do. It's really important to have those times. This has been a weird time for any type of consistency, but yeah, I do try my very hardest to just get away, whether it's just out of town with the kids and my wife Melanie, and very important. I would say before COVID hit, I had established a really healthy rhythm of just knowing, like, I had my year and my months and my weeks really fine tuned after, 8 years of
Yeah. Yeah.
leading. I knew what I needed when I needed it. I knew the peaks and valleys of the church calendar, and I was in a good space. And then COVID hit, all that stuff changed. I lost my gym membership, basketball stopped, all my outlets, and they, couldn't go anywhere with the family. And so that was really hard for a while. Starting to feel some more normalcy now, though, just health wise. But I think rhythms, you need to know your body, you need to know your spirit, you need to know what your family needs, and to be able to make kind of good decisions, stewarding your time in a way that actually makes everything
Yeah.
as healthy as possible. So I'm a creature of habit. I try to I got like an Apple Watch. I try to close like the activity rings every day. I make sure I do that and stay healthy at some level, and see my family and be consistent. And one thing I don't want is my kids to hate the church.
Yeah.
So far they really love it, and they feel special to be pastors' kids at this point. But part of that is making sure that they don't always feel like it's church first and them second. And
Sure.
so I try pretty hard to be there for all the milestones and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. My kids still seem to enjoy the church. My son, the second day that we left him, he actually went to a small group of a church, and he was really excited about that. And for us, we were excited that he chose to do that instead of sleeping in or doing whatever else. But on the physical, my son tells me I'm getting fat, so
oh
that's what motivates me to keep working out and staying in shape.
oh man, how old's your son?
So he's 18. He's
Okay,
18. My
all right.
daughter's 16. So that age, that age. Hey, so I guess a personal question, a deep question. Going through what you went through, seeing a moral failure take place in the local church, really you the desire to stay above that fray, or what was it? Was it something prior that you just said, "I'm going to commit myself to being pure"? You and I both know we've had great friends just
Mhm.
fall in this way and see
Yep.
themselves outside of vocational ministry, not wanting to have their marriages restored. What did that do to you spiritually, seeing that happen in your workplace?
I'll tell you what, like I haven't just seen it. I've seen it more times than I wish by a long shot, and a few times very close and personal, and have been in the wake of those decisions close enough to see the damage, not just to me, but to the people closest to them. And so, especially back in 2012 when I watched all that go down, without getting into too much personal information, I mean, I put up some pretty strong barriers and guardrails in my life and closed some doors back then, just out of sheer fear and I'll never let that happen kind of thing. Which again, but for the grace of God, and I'm not assuming anything, and not looking at somebody else to say I'd never do that kind of thing. I think
Yeah,
the first sign that you're at risk is not acknowledging the fact that we're all prone in our own ways to
sure.
destruction and that kind of thing. So, approaching it with a certain degree of humility and self-awareness, but having accountability in your life, and then just for whatever reason, God keeps having me in contact relationally with situations where moral failure, adultery, that kind of stuff has happened. And I've been close to kids and families and spouses that have gone through that. And it's fear isn't the best motivator, but it is a motivator, and
Yeah.
it's kept me from. I never want to put myself in that position where that would just bring that kind of destruction on our church, on my wife, on my kids, on whoever else, right? So that's that's been a real grace. As much as I wish I haven't been through as many of these scenarios and dealt with this much heartache, on a personal level, it has
Yeah.
caused me to approach, my own issues and my own, tendencies, if they aren't checked and dealt with a lot more intentionality and a lot more fear and trembling, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's been good for that, as far as the accountability piece.
And I
So
know denominations are very important and they bring accountability. I did speak to a friend, and he has given everything away, in the sense that he had an affair, left his wife, family. And I asked him, it's like, what would you have done different? He said, I would have told somebody but I knew if I told somebody before it got bad, that there was just an interest, there was an emotional connection with somebody, I
Mm,
knew that I would be removed for church discipline to whatever extent. And so I feared that.
yep.
And so I did not go down that path. How can we, as pastors, as friends, as a denomination, reach out to allow people to get healing before it does turn that corner where some people feel they can't return?
We got to figure out ways to, to be able to deal with sin. The church has got to figure out how to deal with sin like Jesus would, like to deal with it head on, but not just throw people out and throw people aside. And I think the church has done a horrible job. I mean, I go back to our senior pastor, his restoration. I actually had to go to our general board and seek to get things going so that he could even get on that path, and it's just, we're just not, and I don't think it's anybody's, anybody out there trying to not be a restorative church, but at the same time, and if we're not proactive in it, I think people are just going to keep getting. Well, one, we have an atmosphere of fear where a guy like you or me, especially, I'm going to lose everything if I'm honest, even about this much.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you just you keep it isolated and quiet, and all that happens, and sin grows in the dark. And so it just keeps getting worse. So we've got to figure out how to be a place where people can get victory and help and accountability without losing everything before it's too late.
right.
And then honestly, we got to get better at dealing with things after it's quote unquote too late.
Yeah, yeah,
And one of the things that we've done in this past year has been, we have taken on 4 different situations of pastors and or church staff who were let go from their role for one moral reason or another. And we felt God very much say, we're supposed to be a bridge of restoration. And so we hire them, so to speak,
yeah,
to be restored. And because that's the other piece is, a guy gets removed from their role as a pastor, and then they're told, hey, you got a couple years and then you can look into restoration. Go
right.
do a couple years in the wilderness and you can be restored. And you're like, well, I have a family and I have bills and I need
Yeah,
so I'm either going to do a career change or not. And so one of the things we've tried to do is to jump in at that space where
yeah,
people are left kind of in the desert, and they're either going to go work for sell cars, because that seems to be what preachers do, or they're gonna they're not gonna wait it out. And so
right, right.
we've been intentional in that this year. It's new, but we have a whole kind of pastoral restoration, and we're having conversations even with our district that we're part of here in Atlantic Canada, on maybe this is a new way that the denomination and the local church can partner, so that we don't just kick people who
Yeah,
fail but are repentant to
yeah.
the side. And I hope we can do better, honestly. And I'm looking for ways to contribute to that.
No, that's huge. I think that's great. Is to be applauded. I say this tongue in cheek. I joked with another friend that I'm not going to have an affair because I don't have a skill set besides being a pastor. Like, what am I going to do? Nobody's going to pay me to talk to them,
Yeah.
and so it's just those little things. Diving into this a little bit more, then we'll get you out. Brent Ingersoll, King's Church pastor. Thanks so much for making the time.
Oh, it's been awesome.
uh, with social justice or injustice in this day and age, and being here in Vermont, Canada, you met me a little bit after my obnoxious stage where I was a loud and proud American. But I just think so many times, whether it's social injustice, whether it's the Me Too movement, whatever, for me, we try to keep our patriotism so we are supporting a party instead of supporting people as Jesus did.
Mm.
You've had some great conversations on the podcast, I know, with your staff, other people in your local church. But how can we continue to not try to protect what we have, but just share the love of Jesus for all during these times?
It's a complicated time. I think the first thing, ironically, we live in a time that celebrates being woke, so to speak. And yet the irony of that statement is, you've never if you just go with the current of the great awakening, so to speak, you are just sleeping at the wheel. And it is such a challenge to figure out like where you get your news, who to believe, who to trust. This is a time for Christians to understand that following Jesus in 2020 is is about nuance.
Yeah.
It's not black and white. It's not, do you kneel down, or is it Black Lives Matter? Like there is nuance, like
Yeah.
you were referring to it. I mean, I did a couple podcasts on racial reconciliation, and I had some feedback, like, the classic sort of all lives matter, or do you support Black Lives Matter, that the organization, or it's like there's so much nuance,
Yeah. Right.
and you say one thing and then it has 100 other implications, and it's just, I think right now Christians need to seek first to listen and understand, and then at the end of the day, you have got to be biblically educated.
Right.
And it's not really about what any political leader has to say. You're supposed to take what the political leaders or the news outlets or your friends or your college prof, you're supposed to take that as a Christian and filter that through the word of God, and the
Sure.
things that line up, obey. The
Yeah.
things that don't, push back, but do it with grace and humility. And I think there's a fear, and you might speak to this. I know Vermont's a blue state, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's a fear for Christians now to even say what we believe, because it's construed as hate speech, and it's like, well, you hate gay people, and like, just
Right.
because I have a certain picture, understanding of what sexuality and marriage is supposed to be biblically. And I think there's a real fear for Christians, but I do think there's going to come a day where, if we can just continue to submit ourselves to the authority of the word, and really love people without strings attached, there may come a day where I'm hoping that the cultural kind of zeitgeist, the torrent of culture, sort of starts to see the lunacy of a lot of
Yeah.
it. It's insane, really, like the polarization of left and right, and the tribal kind of
Yeah.
tribalism. Like, it's really wild. And I actually do think there is a growing populace waking up to the fact that, like, this has gotten out of control, where now we're just like, nothing is true,
Yeah.
nothing is authoritative, and it's just the wild, wild west of ideologies, and everyone's going to be left standing with wounds,
Right.
basically.
Well, Dallas Willard wrote it a few years ago, or several years ago now, that we're flying upside down and we think we're right side up. And we
Right.
need to come to that conclusion of what is right side up. And
Yeah.
I'm just reminded that, well, that old school chorus of Refiner's Fire. I think
Yeah.
for me personally and for the church, we have to understand God's refining us for a purpose, and
Yeah.
it's not so we can have our way or who we want to be in leadership all the time. It's just to put Jesus first.
That's right.
Couple fun questions, hopefully to get you out, and then we'll be done. But Brent, thanks so much. Means a
Anytime,
lot.
Jeff. It's been fun. Let's do it again.
So first is, are you really, not that you bet because you're a good Wesleyan, but are you really betting the Toronto Raptors are going to win the NBA championship this year?
I'm all in on the Raps. As of the time of this recording, we are 1-0 in the 2020 bubble playoffs, and it was a beatdown. I don't know if you saw that or not, but it was.
Yeah, but they're playing the Nets. Who do the Nets have? Levert? Like, they have one player.
Yes, but they're NBA professionals playing for their lives, and I mean, it wasn't even. There's two different leagues going on. Look, here's my case for the Raptors. If I
All
had
right.
to bet just objectively, I legitimately would give strong consideration to them coming out of the East, whether or not they can beat LeBron or Kawhi in the finals, which I do think it's going to be one of those LA teams in the finals. That I don't know. If I really had skin in the game, I'm not sure. I'm riding with my prediction is Raptors over the Lakers in 6. Mark it down.
All right.
But I would give strong consideration to the Raptors, and here's my case. One, they're the champs. That means something. They've done it before. They've been there. Best coach in the league, Nick Nurse, best coach in the league. They have no personality problems on that whole team. It was 100% top to bottom, good players who know their role and they just want to win. They're in the bubble context, which I think is gonna take. I mean, come October, mental
I
toughness.
mean, a lot. Yeah.
It's gonna mental toughness, team synergy, commitment and buy-in, focus. Those things are gonna matter. And these guys have championship pedigree, veterans like Marc Gasol. They've got international flavor who's not getting caught up in the election, whether Biden or Trump wins. They don't care. OG Anunoby doesn't care, So I don't know, man. They got a lot of things going for them, and they're playing with house dollars because everyone's writing them off. And so,
so did you burn your Kawhi jersey, and now are you rocking the Van Vliet jersey?
Van Vliet's my guy, man. I hope we can re-sign him, but I didn't. It's bittersweet with Kawhi. I feel like he made a mistake, and I think he knows he made a mistake. I think he knows, but you know what? I think the general, if you talk to any true Raptors fans, I mean, people who were already on the bandwagon before last year and still on it now, I think most of us would say we're grateful for it. Thank you, Kawhi. You were a key cog in the team wheel that won a championship, and we got nothing but love for you. Appreciate it. It is what it is. So you can't blame a guy legitimately. I mean, I don't think he's the nicest human. I mean, I think he gets away with being a pretty big jerk to people a lot of the time. But anyway, you can't blame a guy for wanting to play in his hometown. So
that's true. That's true. So 2 questions, and then we'll get you out. One's a 2-part question. First, a little shout out to Joe Salerno Jr. of the NBL of Canada. If you've gotten to see a game, Joe's a back-to-back Coach of the Year, and they won the championship last year. So shout out to Joe.
I play basketball right now at my underground run with a guy named Anthony Anderson. He was he was the MVP of the NBL, I think 2 times. So dude can play, man. Oh my goodness.
It's good.
Yeah.
So the first question is simply this. If you were cast in a fictional movie, would you want to play the hero or the villain? Remember, it's fictional. What, are you Googling somebody now, or what are you thinking?
There you are. Sorry, Jeff. I think I lost you for a second. So I think the question was, if I was cast in a movie, would I rather play the hero or the villain?
Correct. Yes.
That's a good question. I mean, do I have to be a Christian? Can I?
No, I always say I'm a pastor full time, so I'm playing a villain in a fictional movie every time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it'd be more fun. I guess it depends on if you're doing it from is this supposed to be fun for me from an acting standpoint, or do I want my public persona to take
too much nuance? I was just saying some feature film. But
I don't know. I've never actually thought of myself in a movie before. Okay. So I'd have to, it'd be fun to play a role like the Joker, but I actually think it'd be harder to play a good villain than it would be to play a hero. Heroes are pretty, at least classic heroes. Classic heroes are pretty straight, but now you kind of have the rise of the anti-hero, the Walter Whites of the world. Yep. And it's like, it's nuance again. So
Captain Jack Sparrow. So you can
exactly. Yeah. Like a bad guy who's sort of good. And I think that speaks to the fact that I think we as humans know it's not as cut and dry as we'd like to make it sometimes.
Well, nuance. You said that before. So there's the final question I have, 2 parts. If or when the movie is made about you, who plays you in that feature film?
Who plays me? Oh my goodness.
So I stole this question from Hernando Planos. He's a basketball coach, and he asks it on his podcast, Be Contagious. And I always say The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Not that we look alike, though we don't look that much dislike, but I would choose The Rock for me. But what say you, Brent?
So we're trying to get somebody who's like going to augment reality a little bit. And Maybe DiCaprio. I've been told a couple of different times that, you might look like him a little bit. So I
All
don't know
right.
if that's true, but maybe I like his movies. He's good. Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is
There you
pretty
go.
awesome. He's a Let's go Tom Hanks, because here's why. That guy never picks a bad role.
Well,
So
that's true.
if he plays me, it means it's gonna be a good movie. It's Oscar worthy. We'll go with Tom Hanks.
And so the second part to that question that used to get me in trouble, but now my wife, she just knows it's coming and she's tired of it, but I still ask it. Who plays your love interest in that feature film, whether across from DiCaprio or Tom Hanks? I'll go first. I always say Halle Berry, which my wife just shakes her head at. But what say you?
You're gonna get me in trouble, man. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm gonna punt that one.
There you go. Just let Melanie play herself. That would work. So,
that's what we do. She's Hollywood starlet material anyway. So I think,
for a
I
fact.
think that'll work.
Hey, Brent, thanks so much. And we continue to pray for you at King's Church, kingschurch.cc. And I love the fact that so much attention is on the online service now. I get to catch up with you, but other friends that are pastoring. But just to close us out, how important is it that though people are not meeting together as much or as frequently, they still engage online with the breaking of bread together, just
Mhm.
with the sermons that are being preached and the worship that's just being sung over and over each week?
I think it's crucial, Jeff. It's harder than ever, because I think we're all really tired of digital church, and we're starting to scale in some live stuff now, but even that's not what it was. And we don't have full scale kids ministry and all that kind of thing. So it's still a real challenge. And I did a message last weekend called "Fighting the Drift," and how, like, if we think we can kind of be idle and just wait till things get back to normal, you're going to actually drift toward destruction. Really, like, it's there. You don't drift towards holiness. You don't drift towards life. You don't drift towards success. You have to be intentional and keep pushing. And I think this is a time right now where, more so than ever, we need to fight to continue to get that word every week, even if it wasn't like heaven opened up and God just gave you this goosebump moment where you heard from the Lord. The discipline of saying, I am a person who opens my spirit and my mind, or my home, so to speak, by having it on the TV or whatever. I'm a person who does that every week. There's benefit in just the rhythm and the consistency and the discipline of doing it. I think it's so crucial. And I think people need to fight the tendency to just sort of phone it in until things get back to normal.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is the world's not waiting on you. The devil's not waiting on you. They're coming at you, and you have got to use whatever you have. Is it ideal? No. I'd far rather have nice full gatherings and be in person and do it how we want to, but it is what it is. It wasn't ideal when the Christians had to meet in the catacombs either,
Right.
but they did because they had to. So I used the line in my message, like, I can't wait until the day where we're back full bore and the place is packed and we're not worried about viruses and pandemics. I can't wait for that. And then I said, but I can't wait for that. And
Yeah.
we can't afford to wait. We've got to continue to use the tools that God has given us and to work our faith with them. And that's what I would say to anybody who's sort of checking out. I think everybody's fighting it. I mean, I feel it. I feel it on Sundays when I've been home, with the family. It's a fight. I got little kids at home. One's playing Paw Patrol while communion's happening. It's like, this is anything but holy feeling. And yet it matters. It just matters. It's like exercise. It's not every workout I get feels like I made a difference, but just getting that mental win of, I went to the gym today. I'm a person who goes to the gym. I'm a person who cares about my health. It's a vote toward the person you want to be. And I think that's what's so important about every weekend, tuning in, catching the word, staying caught up with what God's saying to your community is crucial right now.
That's a great word. Hey, Brent Ingersoll, making some time. Thanks so much. We wish you all the best, and we'll be in touch. So thanks again, Brent.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. It's been fun.
And again, that's Brent Ingersoll, the pastor at King's Church, kingschurch.cc, learning to live the spiritual and the practical of every day. That's what God's called us to, making disciples and equipping others. We are beggars, just sharing bread with other beggars. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you again soon. My name's Jeff Fuller. I'm the pastor at hopeforvermont.org, and we're on